on, I think it was Face the Nation recently. You've been critical of this government shifting the burden of this revenue-based fiscal consolidation onto the lower middle class and working Sri Lankans. Even pensioners are paying, double-digit up to 20% in taxes. Could you reiterate your critique, just emphasizing what would be done differently under an SJB? You're the main opposition. If you were in power right now, how would you react to, the deflationary policy is necessary to basically bring some stability, to manage inflation. But how far are you going to go with deflationary policy like this?
Yeah, I think we have basically a limit to that, and already we have, in a sense, done deflationary things, and as a result, you can tick the boxes if you want with the IMF, and you can say you got a primary surplus, you can say the trade deficit has come down, and it's deflationary because the trade deficit will come down if you restrict your imports and exports are going anyway, it's deflationary. So really we have to look at how do we actually make the economy grow. How do we actually attract investment? This is absolutely critical. Our future is in that, right? So the environment becomes so very, very important of how do you actually create this environment for investors. And there are so many different things that need to be done. So as I said, if we establish rule of law, like even commercial courts, with commercial courts, if we establish it, investors will get confidence that actually if there's any issue, they can actually get it resolved. So we will look at regulatory issues and see how regulatory issues can be sorted out, the BOI, etc., so that people could have. Then we are going to look at Sri Lanka. We look at Sri Lankans living overseas as one of the biggest assets the country has. For long, they have been looked at as a liability. Sri Lanka has one of the largest expatriate populations of any country in the world. When you take the number of people overseas and look at divided by the population of the country, they are an asset. First generation, they went there. Right? The first generation has emotional connections here. Father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, relations, old boys networks, old girls networks, law college, medical college, bank association, whatever, they have networks, right? So they want to be connected with Sri Lanka. We want to make them feel welcome here so that they can actually contribute. Then the second and the third generation are born in that country. They are either Australian or New Zealand or Canadian or European or whatever they are. That's the second generation. They have studied there. They are in those networks in those countries. They have climbed from middle to the upper levels of lots of those organizations in those countries. We need them also. We need to make them feel welcome. They may not be citizens of this country. We need to look at giving them dual citizenship. They may be married to foreigners. We need to look at giving them permanent residence in this country. Because life is about families or not dividing families. Right? And then make them feel welcome to come to this country. They have, in the places they work, they have the investments. In the places they work, they have the networks. They can talk about this country. This is a small island country. Only way we can raise our living standards is by connecting to the rest of the world. We are not India, Pakistan or Bangladesh. They have their large internal markets. We don't have large internal markets, but we have a large vision. And we want to deliver on the vision. Our market, primary market, is actually, right, the South Asian subcontinent. Our biggest traders today, trading partners today are the US and Europe and the Middle East to some extent. But Asia, we haven't even really penetrated Asia. We can penetrate Asia. So businessmen will definitely, we will give them the platform to actually create wealth and create wealth. And I have to tell them, and we are going to tax them. After all, we are not just a liberal economic policy. We are a social market economy. We are social democrats. We are there to protect every segment of our society, including those who are low-income earners and the poor. And we will do that. We will take that tax money and we will focus it on health, as we have huge health issues, and we will focus it primarily on education. Our priority is going to be not hard infrastructure. We are going to prioritize over the next decade soft infrastructure. Every Sri Lankan child gets a high education. Everybody doesn't have to do A-levels and go to university like you and me. I mean, we'll do that for whoever wants to go. We will open the door. Education, we won't limit it to state provision. State, private sector, non-government, non-profit distributing private sector as well, like other countries have done very, very successfully. We'll open it to all of them. State must take the responsibility for regulation, for standards, all that the state needs to be, and we need to really implement that. We don't want just fly-by-night institutions coming here and setting up. We want to really have the good ones. So there has to be a process for it. But we are going to give priority that every kid. Then others will go through vocational training or professional training. We won't be sending our mothers and sisters to go and beg in the Middle East working in homes. We will send elder care workers. We'll send nurses. In other words, give everybody. Instead of $300 a month, why can't they earn $3,000 a month? They can earn it, right? And we have to invest in it. So we are very clear that we are going down this route. We have a plan to accomplish it, and we will work very, very, very hard at it.
A slightly sticky situation with the DDO, with the debt optimization program recently. I think there was a conversation about the tax that they've brought in through Parliament on the pension funds. I want to just ask you, just at the basic level, do you think there should have been a local debt restructuring? And I would like to not confuse your personal position with the position of the party, but how do you personally feel about the local debt restructuring?
Yeah, I would say that when you're pushed to the wall and then you have to negotiate. This government unfortunately got into that position. So they're negotiating from a weaker position. I would never agree to a local debt restructuring to be prioritized over a total debt restructuring. All debt restructuring needs to be on the table. If people don't cooperate, they don't get paid anyway. We are suffering anyway. They have made large profits over a long period of time. Come to the table. Talk with us. Right? Come and talk with us. We want to be fair. We want to have winners on both sides of this equation. Here, you just go for a local debt restructuring. And then you do it even worse. Right? You say the bonds need to be restructured. And the treasury bills. So treasury bills, central bank takes a hit. Bonds, you come and then basically limit it to the employees' provident fund. 95% of the people in the employees' provident fund, right? That is the only saving that they will have in a lifetime, right? They'll work for 30, 40 years and then they'll live another 30 or 40 years. Why should we make them dependent on the state? When they have lived with dignity, worked with dignity, they need to be living their retirement with dignity, right? And what have we gone and done? We have taken that EPF and we have confined it to the bonds in the EPF, which I think is absolutely unfair. If we were restructuring the bonds, then we should have restructured it across the board, whether it's the EPF, other superannuation funds, whether it's the primary dealers, whether it's businesses, banks, the wealthy, so that we actually create a more equal society. So we definitely must protect the poor through direct social transfers. But in addition to that, we must protect others as well, and particularly the low income.
Have yourself, as an MP and someone as a finance professional, are you privy to the DSA, the debt sustainability analysis calculations and the gross financing needs? Is that something that you are given access to, or is that something that's only in the committee stages?
I haven't seen any of it, particularly in measuring gross financing needs. And actually, it makes sense only if there's monetary stability. And you have different countries, have different ones. Ecuador at less than 10% collapse. Singapore has had 20% at one stage, and so forth and so on. But we don't have enough information to actually understand it.
So Mr. Murtaza Jaffarji recently stated that his point of view is that I thought was quite interesting. He said, you're asking some people to share the burden, but at that same point, other people should not be allowed to make extraordinary profits while others are taking a hit. So in that sense, I mean, is this, can you call this equitable treatment? Or do you say it's sort of a necessary evil? Would you go in this narrative?
No, I won't accept that it's a necessary evil at all. I won't accept that at all. You say we could have easily, across the board, we could have done the basically debt restructuring and treated everybody with equity. And I think that's a fundamental principle which has been overlooked.
So my final question, Mr. Wickramaratne, I think you're a leading member of Sri Lanka's Christian community, if I may say, and we've recently had these so-called revelations on the Easter attacks from the Channel 4 documentary. Now, there's a lack of transparency, I think, in so many matters related to the Easter attacks and the subsequent investigations. How do you reconcile, and personally and politically, the lack of consequences for the leaders at that time, as you mentioned? Now, we know the president has been, the former president, President Sirisena, has a monetary charge to pay for this. There is nothing on the Prime Minister. There are some other members who have been implicated, but there is, I feel that there is some sort of a politicization and a weaponization of the people's grief here. You know, they're using it as a very clear political tool. And I suppose as the opposition, it's also within your prerogative, because this is a clear failure on the part of the subsequent government and the government at the time. How do you reconcile what's happened with these Easter attacks and the outcomes?
Yeah, I would want to make this clear. To me, the Easter attacks, it happens on a, if you want, a significant day for Christians. It is, I want to make this very clear, it's nothing to do with being Christian. I was brought up like that. My father was a Christian. My wife was brought up Buddhist, right, and her father was a Buddhist. So it's not whether, you know, you belong to a particular religion or you belong to a particular race. It's not relevant. Really, the only person I know personally who perished in the Easter attack was a fellow banker's wife, one of the fellow banker's wives who perished in it. And she was a Buddhist, and that's the only person I know in this. So this says to do with who perpetrated this, who was behind it, and the person responsible or the people responsible must be punished. Whether the bomb is thrown at a church, a mosque, or the Dalada Maligawa doesn't make a difference. Wrong, and we have to speak on behalf of all the... And therefore on the Easter attack, I would say, right, I'm in this big ha-ho about Channel 4. I don't care about Channel 4. It's nothing to do with Channel 4. It is something that happened in our country, right? It shows clearly a failure at that time of defense police and intelligence. We have to say it's a failure, that whoever crept in and got away with it, it's a failure. We have to learn the lessons from it, make sure it doesn't repeat itself, and we have to also make sure that those responsible, so a proper investigation needs to be done. The investigation has to be independent. People have to have confidence in the investigation. And then, based on the investigation, then the legal side needs to take over and there should be prosecutions. Now, why I'm saying this is this. If we don't do this properly, what happens ultimately? Our identity really gets dissolved gradually. This will also move to an international jurisdiction. Why should it move? We had in the last 2 years a former Sri Lankan ambassador being convicted in a US court, right, for financial fraud, a Sri Lankan ambassador. In Sri Lanka, no follow-up. No. We had in the US federal court, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka paying an individual, Zuberi, millions of dollars, right, and he's convicted and he's sent for 12 years in prison, and no follow-up in Sri Lanka. And then we had, as you just prompted, we had the Airbus purchasers. We all talked about it at that time. We didn't have the information, but you have Airbus being taken to court by the Serious Frauds Office of the United Kingdom into the British courts. And they basically convict Airbus of wrongful actions and paying Sri Lankan officials. In Sri Lanka, no action. Do we want the Easter bomb incident also to move into foreign jurisdiction? I certainly don't want it. I want to see Sri Lankans stand up. Let's investigate it properly. And let's get our courts to hear those cases out. And let us show that justice can be achieved in this country.
Member of Parliament, Honourable Eran Wickramaratne, thank you very much for being on Inside. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you.
Thank you very much, sir.